governance is two things, right? It's people and its systems. It's people and its systems. That's why organizations that have poor systems usually are likely or are very prone to bad corporate governance. You know, organizations too, when I say systems, I mean infrastructure, the way the company is set up. It's likely that it could also cause bad corporate governance. So if you are changing, you know, is it that you are changing everybody in the organization or you are changing the people at the top? It can have an effect, but it depends. It depends on a lot of factors. You know, it depends on a lot of factors. You can change. You can totally change the people at the top and bring in fresh people, you know, but you need to bank on the hope that these people are going to, you know, ensure that good corporate governance procedures are in place. So yeah, it does happen sometimes. It does happen sometimes where you clean up the entire management team. You clean up the entire management team and you bring in new people. That would help build corporate governance. But as to whether it works all the time, I'm not sure. As to whether it works all the time, I'm not sure. Yeah. So yeah. So a typical example is I remember sometime, let's say like can't remember, but maybe 10 years, was it 10 years ago? Not 10 years ago, but can't remember. But Berkshire Hathaway made a purchase, and that's one of the things sometimes they typically do. You know, that's what sometimes they do. They make a purchase of a company who they think the fundamentals are right, and by just that governance is poor, and then they totally change everything. You know, but in that case, right, that company was, you know, a local company. So when they changed the entire management, you know, and they brought in new people, the locals of that community were unhappy about it. It's like, this company has been there serving us. They had our people in, and then you suddenly come and change everybody. So it has its implications. It depends, you know, it depends on a lot of things, basically. Yeah. I don't know if that was a long answer, but I don't know if I answered.
Yes, please, you have. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, relationship with investors. The board of directors of a company should seek to develop a positive relationship with shareholders. You know that the shareholders are, of course, the investors, right? It should do this primarily. So how do you maintain relationship with your investors? You do that through general meetings. The whole purpose of general meetings is to maintain that relationship, you know, ensure that that relationship is still there and that you keep in touch with your investors. Very, very important. Very, very important. That's why there's this whole idea of annual general meetings. Yeah. Annual general meetings. Yeah. Then another way you maintain relationship with investors is through the disclosure of information about the company and its affairs. You know, you maintain your relationship with your investors through communication. And the technical term for communication when it comes to finance is disclosure of information about the company and its affairs. You know, very, very important. Very, very important. Another way, which is similar to the first one we talked about, which is the general meetings, was meetings with representatives of major shareholders. You know, the same meetings, right? But sometimes you meet with representatives of major shareholders in in the case of publicly listed companies and companies with private equity investors, right? So if your company has some investments from private equity or PE firms, sometimes you would want to meet with them and try to, have conversations with them. And that's a way of building relationships with your investors. The Code of Best Practices recognizes the importance of the board's relationship with shareholders and other stakeholders. It states that corporate governance practices by the board should be aimed at increasing shareholder value, and it should not be at the expense of shareholders. So the aim of corporate governance, good corporate governance, is at the end of the day, it should increase shareholder value, or it should maximize shareholder value. It's very, very key. The board should have a communications policy. The board, these are the code of best practices, right? Some best practice. The board should have a communications policy. Now, we talked about disclosures. That's all about communications. The board should have a communications policy that enables management to communicate and interact with shareholders. The board should have a communications policy. It's very, very important. And one of the things about communications is that for those who are doing auditing, there's a reason why, the financial statements have to be released. And those who are in audit, that there's something called busy season, because during busy season, you have to, work on auditing the financial statement so that it can be released in a timely manner, So not just communicating, but communicating in a timely and continuous manner. When it's necessary, you need to communicate, and it has to be timely, because investors need that information to make decisions. Now let's talk about the importance of disclosure. The importance of disclosure. Okay. So the board of directors govern the company in the interest of shareholders. Good corporate governance should create trust, between the board and shareholders, and encourage shareholder support for the board and its strategies. One of the things that disclosure does is to build trust. It's just like communication, right? If you are in, a relationship with someone, or, whatever relationship it is, if you communicate more, it builds trust. So that's an importance of disclosure or communication. The Code of Best Practices states that all shareholders should have equal access to corporate information. So there should be no bias, right? All shareholders should have equal access to corporate information. Equal access to corporate information. It's very, very important. Okay, any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, as we've already indicated, information, and communication of that information is very, very important. But this information must be quality information. So what does this mean? When we say the information must be quality, what does it mean? The Code of Best Practices is saying here that communications and reports by the board should be in plain language. That's what we mean by quality. It should be understandable, and it should be consistent with previous reports. It should also have meaning and relevance, and should be provided in a timely fashion. So when we say information should be quality information, it must be based on the principles of fairness, promptness, relevance, openness, with substance taking precedence over form. Who remembers what substance over form is? Anyway, I don't think it's even relevant to strategy, but who remembers substance over form? Can anyone share with us what it means, substance over form?
This is where the organization, the individual looks at the substance of the transaction instead of the legal form of that transaction.
So what does that mean?
Okay, so so let's say, for instance, leases.
Mm-hmm.
Leases, for example. So for example, leases, you don't own the asset, you don't have title to the asset, but because of the nature of the transaction of the leases, that is the finance lease, you are able to record it into your books as though you own it. So that's the substance over the form, which
fantastic. That's a very good example. So it's like those times when we are kids, right? They'll say something like, for those people who were that about and they had bicycles, some of your friends will say, "Mommy, ride," or "Give me a ride, give me a ride." Then you are the legal owner